Russia has attacked Poland.
The widely used term nowadays is hybrid war. And you could certainly say that it is already underway because things keep happening in Poland all the time. These incidents seem to be occurring quite frequently.
Since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, neighboring Poland has also been systematically under threat. And while previously only politicians and statesmen talked about a possible war between Russia and Poland, over time these predictions began to come true. The climax came in September 2025, when about 20 Russian drones crossed into Polish airspace. A significant number of them entered from Belarus. 4 UAVs were shot down. Polish military officials stated that in September, the threat from Russian drones was quite real.
So far, the measures that Poland is currently taking in response to the situation are primarily diplomatic in nature, focusing on political and international channels, and have not yet shifted or escalated to any form of military response or action at this time. But if we talk about the country's military leadership, they openly state that Russia is preparing for a possible attack on Poland, and Poland is also taking appropriate measures.
It's not just about drones. Recently, there have been several acts of sabotage on the railways in Poland. In particular, a section of track leading to the Polish-Ukrainian border was damaged. The country's Prime Minister, Donald Tusk, emphasized that these were acts of sabotage. According to him, 2 Ukrainian citizens are suspected of the attacks. They arrived in Poland from Belarus and managed to escape back after the sabotage.
If the Poles had managed to detain them, they would have faced rather lengthy prison sentences. Basically, it means those who were willing to sell themselves to Russia for money.
Polish law enforcement is convinced that the Ukrainians were hired by Russian special services and has already demanded that Belarus extradite the suspects. This chain of events culminates in an attack in Russia's St. Petersburg on the Polish ambassador Krzysztof Krajewski when he arrived in the city to meet with Poles living there.
The Poles are perceived in this particular context as genuine adversaries, and they sick this gang on the ambassador. It is worth mentioning that the police did nothing. They just watched and basically smirked. This is not just a natural outcome. I'm quite sure that this particular attack was very carefully planned and officially sanctioned by the relevant authorities, either in St. Petersburg or perhaps even in Moscow.
An aggressive group of Russian activists carried signs with anti-Polish and anti-Ukrainian slogans and attacked the ambassador because his country is helping Ukraine. The Polish Ministry of Foreign Affairs stated, "At first there were verbal insults, but then there was a clear attempt to use physical force, which made it necessary for the ambassador's security guards to intervene."
There's no need to make things up and, based on these inventions, form an opinion about Russia. There's no need to create an image of Russia as the enemy. You've made up this idea that Russia wants to attack NATO. Have you completely lost your minds or what? You're as dumb as this table. Who came up with this? It's nonsense, you understand? Utter nonsense.
The Kremlin has begun preparations for war against Poland.
We are now closer than ever to open conflict since World War II.
This is a pre-war situation. The General Staff has announced a planned attack.
The aggressor has begun preparations for war. He is creating an environment meant to undermine public trust in the government, the army, and the police, in order to set the stage for potential aggression against Polish territory.
The chief of the General Staff of Poland stated that recently there has been a significant increase in acts of sabotage in the country, as well as large-scale cyber attacks. These events may indicate that Russia is creating conditions to destabilize the situation and weaken the state from within. One of the most recent such incidents was an explosion on the Warsaw-Lublin railway line.
Analyzing all the incidents that have taken place in Poland and in Europe, one can say that all the traces lead east to Muscovy.
Polish authorities believe that this episode and other similar cases bear the hallmarks of pre-planned operations that may be linked to the activities of foreign intelligence services.
The sabotage of the railway line on the Warsaw-Lublin route is an unprecedented act of sabotage, directly targeting the security of the Polish state and its civilian population. We will catch those responsible, whoever they may be.
2 months prior to this, about 20 Russian drones entered Polish territory en masse for the first time. Poland's security services stated that the threat from the drones was more serious than the authorities had initially believed.
The claim that these were merely cardboard and paper objects is not entirely true.
The Polish leadership does not hide the fact that it is preparing for a direct confrontation.
We can respond to these threats either symmetrically or asymmetrically. We have the full arsenal of tools at our disposal.
Military analyst and former SBU officer Ivan Stupak is convinced that the Kremlin is already waging a hybrid war against Europe, and the only question is when it will escalate into an open conflict.
For Russia, what it is currently doing in Europe is already a war, an asymmetric, non-linear hybrid war, call it what you will, but it is ongoing.
Poland's strategic position between the Kaliningrad region and Belarus makes it one of the key countries for the security of all of NATO, and Warsaw itself plays an important role in ensuring the defense of the eastern flank. Subsequently, the defense of Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania will directly depend on the ability of Polish forces to respond to potential threats in a timely manner.
Everything depends on our stance, whether we can deter the enemy or encourage them to act aggressively.
While most European countries spent many years discussing the potential threat from Russia, Poland was engaged in systematic and purposeful preparation. Over the past decades, Warsaw has significantly strengthened its military potential, and the buildup of its defense capabilities began immediately after Russia's annexation of Crimea.
While other countries waited to see who would make the first move, Poland took action.
In 2024, Poland's defense budget grew to 4.7% of its GDP. This is the highest figure among all NATO member states. Modernization of military equipment and an increase in troop numbers to more than 200,000 make the Polish army one of the largest in Europe. In addition, Poland has become one of the largest purchasers of weapons from the United States. The country has invested about $50 billion.
Without the United States, there is no alliance. We need to spend more on defense, not to replace the Americans in Europe, but to keep them here.
Poles are tired of the war going on in the neighboring country, so there has been a deterioration in their attitude toward Ukrainians. The Polish Minister of Defense stated that people are not seeing the main enemy, and those who incite against Ukraine are acting against Poland.
This should be valued and respected, not used to incite hostility against Ukrainians in Poland or to fuel anti-German sentiment.
The chief of the Polish General Staff called for the creation of a Cold War 2.0, large-scale investment in defense, and making it clear to Moscow that any attack on NATO will be met with a decisive response. Now, the future of European countries depends on NATO's readiness to defend itself. The Kremlin is expanding the geography of the war. Europe and NATO are preparing for a possible invasion by the Russian dictator.
This needs to be done subtly, carefully, but it absolutely must be done.
Drones are increasingly violating the airspace of European countries. Such incidents have been recorded in Denmark, Norway, Romania, and Poland. In this way, the Kremlin is increasing pressure on Europe through hybrid attacks and preparations for a large-scale conflict. Poland remains the primary country at risk. The strike on September 10th is a deliberate, carefully planned strategy by Russia.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
For the Russian Federation, Poland is one of the priorities. One of them, not the only one, but one of them. Why? Because it is precisely through Polish territory that a huge amount of military cargo is transported toward Ukraine to the Ukrainian fronts. And in Russia, they are well aware if this route is cut off, then Ukraine is left. Its logistics are disrupted, in other words, severed, and it would have to be rebuilt. And at that point, it would actually be possible to achieve some territorial gains.
Moreover, in the event of an invasion of Poland, Russia could prepare a force of 100 to 150,000 troops to carry out the Suwałki corridor scenario.
At the moment, up to 40,000 Polish army servicemen have been redeployed directly to the borders with the Republic of Belarus. Similar actions are being carried out on the territory of the Baltic states. In addition, a naval component of joint NATO exercises is currently taking place in the Baltic Sea.
There are also increasing reports that Russia might attack the Baltic countries. Since the start of the large-scale war in Ukraine, Russian forces have increased the number of provocations in the Baltic region.
At present, it is clear that the Russian Federation does not have the forces for a full-scale invasion like the one carried out in Ukraine. Although our military notes that over the past 8 months, there has indeed been a gradual decrease in the amount of Russian equipment destroyed on the front lines each month. In other words, the graphs are trending lower and lower, starting from January, February, specifically for 3 types of weaponry: air defense systems, tanks, and IFVs. So there is a wide margin here for speculation. Why is that? Either they have started producing fewer tanks and IFVs, or they are producing them but hiding them somewhere for some other purposes.
Another pretext to start a war is the Estonian city of Narva. It is located in the east of the country. A small river separates it from Russia. Even today, in the narratives of Kremlin propaganda, Narva is portrayed as a city where Russians are actively oppressed by Estonians.
These are roughly 200 to 300 of Gherkin's riflemen who could infiltrate a populated area, say Narva, and carry out the same scenario as they did in Crimea and Donetsk. They seize the post office, the telephone exchange, the telegraph, the town hall, the mayor, and declare the creation of some kind of People's Republic. And then they ask, Putin, send in the troops? This scenario is actually quite realistic.
Only in Russia, everyone is shouting from all sides that they supposedly don't want a war with Europe and NATO. The alcoholic ex-president Medvedev insists that Russia has supposedly always come to Europe as a liberator, not as an invader. And also Putin's southern accomplice, Maria Zakharova, has started accusing Ukraine of preparing an anti-Russian provocation. Supposedly, Russian drones are being used in Poland and Romania to push NATO into a war against Russia.
The message came from the Foreign Intelligence Service of the Russian Federation. I saw it yesterday. It was a very funny message. Let me explain why it was funny. The Foreign Intelligence Service of the Russian Federation is a paper tiger. Actually, it's not even a paper tiger, it's more like a damn paper teddy bear. This organization isn't respected even within the Russian security hierarchy. They're not respected, not feared, and not seen as an authority even by ordinary district police officers. And so all that's left for this service is to come up with and generate some random ideas, random conspiracies, just to show that their work matters.
In response to threats from Russia, NATO and EU countries are urgently strengthening their defenses, building a wall of drones, and discussing providing Ukraine with air defense systems to create a shield. After Russia violated Polish airspace, NATO launched Operation Eastern Guard. Denmark has also called up several hundred reservists for service. The soldiers have been ordered to report as soon as possible.
At the moment, air units are being redeployed to the territory of Poland and Romania. These are NATO's flanks. In addition, NATO countries are redeploying ground units to the territory of the Baltic states. Naval exercises are being conducted in the waters of the Baltic Sea. It should be noted that the newest United States aircraft carrier is currently in the relevant waters of Denmark. And this is a serious signal to the Russian Federation. In addition, French Rafale jets have been deployed to Polish territory, and these are nuclear-capable aircraft.
In fact, Russia began threatening NATO as far back as 10 years ago. At that time, Turkey, led by Erdogan, was in the crosshairs. Back in 2015, a Russian bomber violated the country's airspace. According to Turkish authorities, before it was shot down by a Turkish F-16 fighter jet, the Russian plane did not respond to warnings. Now, Putin's strategic goal is to break up the collective West and undermine trust among NATO members.